Destined to Parent a Problem Child by 1zukku on AO3, Chapter 3. Summary. Another meeting between the vigilante Aruzu, or Izuku Midoriya, and Eraserhead, or Shota Aizawa.
What has happened? Orezu, or Izuku, had heard enough about a particular villain roaming the streets. He stuck to the shadows to gather as much information as he could, and here's what he has learned about the evildoer. An adult man, tall, broad stature, brutal-like fighting style, Quirk seems to amplify muscular power after certain conditions are met. That is everything Izuku knew as of current. Also, most of that gathered over the past few days. While he stuck to the darkest shadows determinedly, he had no intention of encountering Eraserhead again. That could not bode well for him, because Eraserhead was a hero, and while he claimed to wish no harm to Izuku, could any hero ever really be counted on to act against the greater good? The short answer to that he came up with was no, they couldn't. No matter what weird, dazed feelings he was sure they both experienced, he was losing his train of thought. Where was he? Yes, the villain. After all the information he had gathered on the adversary, he decided he was ready to face him tonight and hopefully turn him into the police. A restaurant. That was where the encounter happened, just outside the border of the dirt poor area he lived in. So the establishment was not exactly within his typical social class, hence why they had a walk-in freezer. Why had Izuku thought it was a good idea to corner a villain he had somewhat limited information about? At the time, it seemed like plenty, but now that the larger villain was stalking towards Izuku, whose back was against the back wall of the freezer room, the information seemed worthless and puny. Izuku couldn't win like this. As much as he hated to admit it, his quirk wasn't compatible with largely frozen air. There wasn't nearly enough heat in here for him to do anything with. The most he could muster was a half-assed shield of air in front of him. The heat of it found from the restaurant's kitchen door of the freezer left ajar. He couldn't die here. He just needed to take a hit or two and wait for an opening. Then he'd book it and leave the villain to someone with a more compatible quirk. Izuku, or currently Orozu, braced for his poorly made shield to take the impact, but it never came. He slowly dragged his gaze down the new scene in front of him and paled for a reason other than the cold environment. A bandage-like capture weapon wrapped around the villain, he only struggled for a moment longer before he was sliding down to the floor, knocked out cold by a swift kick to the back of the head. The man's fallen form revealed the one responsible for the takedown, Eraserhead. Because, of course, it was. Izuku was convinced his night couldn't get any worse. Now, he surely had no hopes of an escape. He was cornered, and a trained pro hero was much harder to sidestep than some street villain.
You can put your shield down now. It looks like it's taking some serious energy to maintain it.
Eraserhead drawled, letting his hands drop to his sides and away from his capture weapon. Izuku stared at him like he'd grown a third head, wondering how he'd reached that conclusion. Even though it was correct, then he noticed the shaking in his fingers. Yes, it could have been from the harsh chill of the freezer, but the trembling was much too prominent for it to have been simple shivering. The daze, though, was back. So Izuku felt compelled enough to listen and let his less than amazing shield dissipate before speaking. Were you looking for me? Or is this just luck that we met again? He asked, trying to sound impartial, as well as he could at least, with his body practically begging him to do anything but run. The feeling was overwhelming, but not unpleasant.
In all honesty, I was searching for you. It's my job, after all. But I didn't think I'd find you tonight, no.
Eraserhead said, looking the opposite of what a hero should. He looked relaxed, like he couldn't be bothered to even think of putting his guard down. Are you going to do anything? The boy asked, his voice having a confused lilt to it as he tilted his head a bit to the side, his hood moving with the movement, but still keeping his hair concealed entirely.
Do anything? Well, I was hoping to speak with you, but how about we get out of the freezer first? The man proposed, his words cushioned with a sense of dry humor. Izuku narrowed his eyes. How was he supposed to trust a pro-hero to simply let him move to a more comfortable environment and ambush him while he transitioned? But, well, it was hard to feel anything but trust for the underground hero, not with his body still alight with that stupid feeling that forced his feet to do anything but flee. So he nodded and watched as Eraserhead left the freezer first, walking backwards so his gaze never left the boy. He stopped in front of the exit of the restaurant, waiting for Izuku to leave the freezer as well. So he did, and he stopped somewhat away from the pro-hero. He made sure he was still just a talking distance away, but there was still a table between them, though either of them could easily jump it. The barrier made Izuku feel slightly more at ease. Why are you looking at me like that? Izuku spoke, his face scrunched in wariness as he looked at Eraserhead's expression. It looked like he was commanding Izuku to speak first, just by boring his gaze into him. You seemed more talkative last time we met.
The man answered simply. Well, that was when you had something to talk to me about. He snapped in the tone that only a teenager could convey.
I was giving you a chance to address it yourself, kid.
The man sighed, seemingly resigned to his fate of having to carry the conversation. To address what? He replied, purposely oblivious. What good would come from him saying it himself? A courtroom? Incarceration? Yeah, no thanks, he thought.
I know you feel it too, Orezu.
Eraserhead spoke, pulling air quotes around Izuku's vigilante name.
And I know you're not stupid or oblivious. So, you know exactly what it is, too, don't you?
He drawled, seemingly unbothered, but something about him still screamed that he was sincere. It doesn't matter what I've theorized. What are you getting out of this conversation? Izuku spoke defensively, prickly as a porcupine. The indirect admission slipped from his lips before he could even stop it, because he felt like there was significantly less fear of holding back when he was in this pro-hero's presence.
Hopefully, my soul child,
Eraserhead replied, pointedly, his eyebrows raised, the slightest bit at Izuku's snappy tone. I think you're looking in the wrong place, then, the boy replied, his fiery tone seemingly doused all of a sudden. Within the ransacked restaurant, the light bulbs smashed on the floor. The moonlight didn't give enough clarity to see the softening of Izuku's eyes. If Eraserhead could see the change, though, he'd notice that they weren't softening in thought of something endearing.
No, I'm not. Aruzu, the fact that you haven't run from me yet proves that you're feeling the exact same thing. I don't want to push you, but I also can't stand the thought of leaving this unfinished.
He spoke uncharacteristically talkative as he bored his true intentions to the young vigilante. The boy said nothing. What could he say? Yes, please, don't leave me. I don't want to be alone. No, of course not. He couldn't just say that. Soul bonds are special. They're complicated. They're a blessing far too generous for the likes of him. Izuku thought. His mind raced as his fingers twitched with a newfound restlessness.
I'm not going to hurt you, Aruzu, but I'm also not going to let you avoid this. If it bothers you as much as it did me when we parted last time, then I'll be damned if I let it happen again.
Eraserhead spoke, slowly but surely taking steps towards Orozu. His movements went unnoticed by the vigilante. He was too focused on the thoughts racing through his head, and he couldn't sense any malicious intent. Why would he notice? Well, he didn't notice, at least not till Eraserhead was right in front of him, his hand already reaching out faster than Izuku could block him. The tips of his fingers touched Izuku's cheek, since that was the only skin of him left uncovered. The feeling was instantaneous. Izuku's flight response died out almost immediately and instinctively leaned into the careful hand. His eyes stared at the close form of the pro-hero, blinking in shock, but devoid of fear or anger. They were right. Of course they were right. It was a soul bond. The bond snapped into place, pushing Aruzu, or now more accurately, since he was nothing like the guarded vigilante Izuku, to step forward in a hug. Although clumsy and slightly out of place, he wrapped his arms loosely around Eraserhead's middle. Eraserhead blinked in shock at the young vigilante's form embracing him. It took a moment for the surprise to recede, but when it did,
He loosely wrapped one arm around the boy's shoulder blades, the other finding home on the back of his head, crushing against his hoodie. Even with the confusing dynamic change, now that they were so close, Eraserhead knew at least one thing. Aruzu, or now confirmed to be his soul child, needed a shower. That was the end of Chapter 3 of Destined to Parent a Problem Child by 1zukku on AO3. Thank you so much for listening, and if you like this, please go support the original author. Links in the description below. Hope you like this. I'm sorry it took so long. Happy Halloween. My life got busy with work, and I got TikTok, and I wrote some stuff on AO3, and my ADHD was hitting me hard. Sorry. I'm going to try to work on some more of these. Hope you have a great day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, kittens, and bye, heroes.